After 2 decades, we finally have something that resembles a proper Jet Set Radio sequel. You two can fuck off. Rush Cyberfunk has been my most anticipated game ever since it got announced a few years back, and I've been following with a bit of caution and worry so I don't overshoot my expectations. And after playing it, I can say it was the right call, as it delivers on everything it promised but still feels lacking when it comes to raising the bar. Starting off with the movement, you're able to select 3 different types of wheels depending on the character. You have traditional inline skating that controls like how you think the original games play. That's not me being snarky about them being a shit. It's more so a marriage of the weight and momentum of the first game and the speed and quick pivoting of future, without any of the slipperiness or anticipation needed when grinding on rails or platforming. It feels incredibly smooth and responsive, being able to pull off any trick or combo chain you want flawlessly. You then have a skateboard, which controls exactly the same, and a BMX also controls the same.
Oh my god.
They have a bit of nuance when it comes to doing certain combos while boosting or jumping off a half pipe, but while quick swapping between the 3 constantly, I really didn't notice anything. They all ride on the same surfaces and have the exact same control scheme, which is a bit unfortunate as I was hoping it would bring a bit of variety in how you do challenges. Though, the ones present are really fun and addicting on their own. The game has a bigger focus on chaining combos and collectathon platforming that resembles the old Underground classics. You can pull off a manual by holding down the right trigger and you activate a multiplier when leaning into the corner on rails. It lets you speed up and build a meter for a boost that's really fun to fuck around with on foot. That paired along with a double jump makes it work like a safety net for redirecting midair or closing a gap, so you don't have to worry about cheap falls or restarts anymore. This lets you chain combos for days, and you can get a lot just out of watching the number go up. Or maybe my brain is permanently conditioned by all the hours I wasted on Thug Pro. The focus on scoring combos can also be pretty detrimental, which I'll talk about later. I can't believe they watched my review of Jet Set Radio and implemented score attacks when facing off rival gangs under a time limit, and each one goes hard as shit. Well, you know, unfortunately they didn't, because they still kept the combo Simon Says, which I know it's a series staple, but I didn't like it back then and I really hate it here as well. It ain't the end of the world though, as your main focus will always be tagging the streets, which in this game they call bombing. Instead of mashing buttons and flicks to tag walls, you now have to connect the dots with different art depending on the order you choose, making it quick, snappy, and flashy as the camera whips around. And if you're worried about no custom tags, then don't, because you can still import any art you want on both PC and Switch if you know the method. At the start of the game, they really want you to physically fight the cops, but then over time they kind of just drop it because they knew the combat just plain sucks. Instead of tagging them into submission, you just spam kicks and sweep until they're down, and it's so slow and ineffective when you can just boost through an entire crowd to insta-kill them. You can also pop out your phone at any time, and it comes with this really cool photo mode that tracks around your model, letting you snap pics at a realistic angle or watch Subway Surfers gameplay when you inevitably get bored of the game's story. That while starts promising and insane, ends up being a wet fart that I started to resent the more and more I got frequently interrupted mid-combo. It really doesn't help with how they skin on the voice acting for the game. It's just limited to just a few barks like an old JRPG. You have your little intro with all the gangs again, but without the voice, energy, or charisma of someone like DJ K, it's just fucking awkward with how the camera pans around with a looping track. So it's a really good thing that the soundtrack is fucking incredible.
Yeah, who got them moves, got them vibes, we got the strategy, do it all night, do it all day, no wasting time, pick up the crew, get ready for the ride.
Unsurprisingly, it's hands down the best part of this game. Team Reptile was already putting out bangers with Lethal League, and this game blows that shit out of the water. You of course have the Twitter account that shall not be named, returning to do 3 of the headline tracks, and they're all slick and full of energy with wild percussion and different funk grooves sampled at every second. The people being an obvious ode to the concept of love, and it honestly overshadows it. Agua is another banger, and yes, I'm biased since it samples a Puerto Rican track, but still, it keeps the old track's flow while highlighting it with a heavy-hitting bass and an earworm of a short string riff looping in and out. It's also really good to see some fan rep with a 2 track, and if you know, you know, but if you want to know, then just listen to I Wanna Know. make this video too long, but like, you already know you can just listen to this game's entire soundtrack on YouTube on a playlist, so listen to it, it's really good. The only thing I will say though is that I think condensed milk sucks. And speaking of, I mentioned earlier how leaning into big combo chains for the gameplay had a few consequences, and one thing I couldn't get over was how a lot of the levels reject that tight verticality and rather offer these big open areas with plenty of space to correct your movement and grind off of anything. You see, part of the first Jet Set Radio's appeal was skating in mostly realistic urban areas like neighborhoods, red light districts, and crowded cities. It's the main reason why I think Future can be kind of dog shit when it gets crazy with its scale and over-reliance on rails, and Rush doesn't really address this as much as just sidestep it by making everything really wide. The shallowness often noticeable by the insane reduction of crowds and popping in these areas, or the sometimes ridiculous amount of backtracking you have to do just to get that one tag you missed to get your rep up. I'm really not all too happy with it, but if you put a gun to my head, I'd still pick any of these over Faro Park. Though you won't feel too far from home when most areas in this game resemble Future's stages so closely that it almost feels lazy. And I know there's some smartass out there thinking, well, it's a Jet Set Radio successor, so it should copy just the entire visual aesthetic and even level design as closely as possible, but like even the first two games had entirely different looking areas and a lot of them were remixes of the first game too. The only area that stood out to me being the construction zone they lifted from Lethally. It really feels like the game is solely lacking a visual identity. The Jet Set and Ghost in the Shell influences are made very apparent, but it's nothing that really stands out on its own. You can tell just by glancing over the character designs. The streetwear they have going on is sick, but it's not as expressive or iconic of any contemporary fashion trends. You take a look at a character like Solus, he's a perverted masochist, so he's made to look like a crash test dummy. Where's the crazy eyes, the gross facial expressions, or the embarrassing baggy anime and video game themed t-shirts with stains all over them? I need to be fucking represented, goddammit. Yeah, characters like Vinyl that I literally can't tell what they're trying to convey. And compare how Beat had such a great silhouette that they use it for promo art next to this game's pro tag being a SoundCloud rapper in a beanie. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but it's not like I'm trying to be a hater. The game already has a really good character designs in all the rival gangs, like the slick gas mask wearing backup dancers in Futurism, or the literal mixed race gang that all look like Frankenstein abominations. Please do not ask me what they meant by this. And can we take a sec to appreciate just how cool the old heads look, carrying around boomboxes and pimp canes decked out in gold? Shit's sick, and it proves that they have some really good ideas, but the execution on the art style overall just feels like emulation when it works and confusing when it doesn't. Maybe it's just the heavy Eastern European influence that just doesn't click with me. Seriously, just add a goth bitch and I'll take back my word. I know I just bitch about the game more than praise it, but my overall thoughts on the game are pretty positive. The movement and soundtracks are at the core of what makes a Jet Set Radio game fun to play, and they fucking nailed it. All the content present is fun and addicting to go for 100%, giving me plenty of exploration and playtime. But the places where it doesn't hit the mark just feel a bit disappointing, considering just how long it's been since we got a game like this and how the devs opted to play it safe instead of trying out something crazy. Like I mentioned before, I made a really good call by not expecting much and avoided all that disappointment, but I can't really ignore all the faults outright. As an addendum to this, the pricing on the game being $40 has caused a slight controversy, but once again, as a die-hard Jet Set Radio fan, I'd fucking pay $100 for this game even if it turned out to be shit. This coupled with a day one DLC inclusion that the devs promised wouldn't be a thing, and it being a Lethally character I main makes it really hard for me to blindly sing this game's praises. About the DLC, by the way. Bomb Rush feels like a true sequel to a Jet Set Radio game, but one that feels stagnant and iterative, like an annual release 20 years too late. It's sad that it warrants so many comparisons to the series as it lacks any kind of true identity, but the devs made their bet this way. It's more of the same, and that's great for starving fans, but it can feel pretty stale to everyone else that can get the same amount of entertainment just by playing Jet Set Radio or Jet Set Radio Future. Regardless, I hope the game does well financially enough to warrant a sequel where they can really grow their legs artistically while building upon this already perfect formula.